Any discussion of blues guitar and blues guitar soloing would be woefully incomplete if we didn't talk about the one and only Albert King. Albert King, to many people, is the greatest blues guitar player ever. Of course, we know there's no such thing as the greatest anything, and you can't really say that. But you can say it about Albert. I'm kidding. Albert King is so influential on everyone, tremendously influential on Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton. Very different from B.B. King. You know, B.B. had sort of a sophisticated style, as I was saying, you know, and you could hear, you know, he loved those jazz players I mentioned, like Charlie Christian and Django. Albert played more along the lines, for lack of a better term, it's more like country blues in the sense of there's an instrument from the early days of Delta blues and the plantations called a diddley bow. And what a diddley bow is, one way to make a diddley bow, and the way a lot of those guys did it, this is what Buddy Guy told me, he did this exact thing. They would, from a whisk broom, the wire that held, you know, the bristles of the broom, they would unwrap that, so have a piece of wire, like copper wire, and you'd put a nail in the side of the house and a nail in the ground, in the porch, you know, the floor. And then they'd wrap the wire around each nail, make a taut, you know, on a little diagonal. And then take a piece of bone or a piece of glass, like a bottleneck or something, and pick the string, pick this wire, and move the slide up and down. And so the distance between where you're picking and the placement of this hard object is changing the pitch. There's no frets, there's no nothing. It's just a wire in the air. But the notes are moving up and down very much like a human voice, and you could add vibrato, and it's just a sound that existed and is a huge part of Delta blues. And Albert King, I think, was exposed to that, but the reason I bring it up is because the way he played the guitar more closely emulated what you get with a diddley bow than just about any other guitar player. And in fact, physically, just in terms of the physics of the instrument, the way he played, he didn't use an object and slide up and down a string. He used his fingers and fretted, but he would stay on one string and play long series of notes and phrases, all from one fretted position. And so in that way, the one string thing is like a diddley bow. Albert King was another guy like Freddie. He's tremendous, 6'5" or 6", huge guy. He played a flying V, just like Freddie King. He made the flying V look like a ukulele, look like this tiny little thing. I did meet him and talk to him a few times. The first time he played at a famous place on Long Island called My Father's Place in Roslyn, New York, North Shore of Long Island, about 40 minutes from New York City. And it was probably the late 70s, and he was wearing a jumpsuit. I'll never forget that. Sort of like a tan jumpsuit, which was interesting. And then he liked these acoustic amps, these transistor amps, these big giant amps, and that had reverb tanks in them. So if you listen to any Albert King live record post 1966, when he stamps his foot to kick off the song, you can hear the reverb tank in the amp going, you know, that's just part of the vibe. But it was amazing. I was sitting, you know, in the third row, got to watch him play. And then he came outside after, and I shook his hand. And it was like putting my hand in, like, in a catcher's mitt or something. You know, his hands were tremendous. And he took a flying V strung for a righty, and he flipped it over and played it lefty, but he left it strung for a righty, so the strings are all upside down. So the thin, high E string was here. So if he wanted to get this sound, he would do it here. So everything was backwards. So that's another thing that makes his playing so distinct and individual and hard to recreate for normal guitar players or people who play with the guitar strung in a standard, well, the way it is normally strung. He also tuned his guitar down a step and a half, so the strings were very loose and slack. So essential to his style also were these really big bends and picking with his fingers, which all came from the guitar being upside down. All of these things, you put them together, ends up, results in an absolutely unique sound and style that was Albert's own, and certainly as influential and brilliant and powerful, and will live on forever in so many incredible songs that he recorded, like Born Under a Baton, or I'll Play the Blues for You, or Angel of Mercy. Get Out of My Life Woman, his version of Get Out of My Life Woman is great. There are just so many songs that are incredible. So one of the times when I saw him at my father's place, anybody who saw Albert King or was familiar with him knows about his temper. He seemed to be angry pretty much all the time about something. And so maybe 3 songs into the set, like I said, I was sitting very close. He was just glaring over the audience, probably, it seemed, looking at the sound man. And literally steam was coming out of his ears. And he just looked, if looks could kill. And he's, the audience is just sort of like, whoa, like what's going on? And then he goes up to the microphone, he goes, "Hey, Mr. Sound Man, you don't fix this sound, I'm gonna come back there and I'm gonna fix you." So we're all turning around like, what, But that was like part of every Albert King show. Included him just being really angry and scary. I saw him actually got to talk to him on this particular night, so I'll wrap it into one thing. I ran into him in the stairwell in 1991, I believe it was. They used to do these Benson Hedges Blues Festivals at the Beacon Theater and have all these great artists play. And I met John Lee Hooker that night and Fabulous Thunderbirds. Stevie Ray Vaughan would run up there and play while he was still alive. And those Benson Hedges Blues Festivals were great. B.B. King, like everybody, they were fantastic. Etta James. And so from being a writer, writing for a magazine, I usually had a backstage pass and I could go run around and bother people, say hello. And I was in the stairwell and just ran into Albert King. And in this particular occasion, he was so nice. He wasn't the angry Albert King. He was the sweetest person ever. And I told him how much I loved him and how his playing was so influential on me. And he was very gracious. And I said, "Well, I'd love to interview you sometime." And he's like, "Well, here's my home phone number." And he gave me his home phone number. And he says, "Yeah, just call me, like whenever you want." So it's sort of funny, like there was a part of him where he was angry and make sure you don't talk to him. He'll scream at you. And then the other side was, "Oh, here's my home phone number, call me whenever you want to." And I never did call him because I didn't want to bug him, and then I regretted it when he passed away shortly after that. But there are so many records and a lot of live records. And one in particular called Live Wire Blues Power, and the song Blues Power is just a college course times a billion in how to play blues and what blues music is and what it's about. It's so expressive and has so much power. And he does this rap. I know my stories get long, but he does this rap in the song talking about blues, like what is the blues? This is why it's such a famous song and so well loved. And the rap is so great. One time I was sitting with Stevie Ray Vaughan and we were talking about Live Wire Blues Power. One of his friends had told me that when they were 15, Stevie said, "Let me borrow that record," and then he never gave it back. This is Roddy Colonna, his drummer. He said, "Yeah, Stevie never gave me my Live Wire Blues Power back." But we were talking, me and Stevie, and we started to do the rap, and we both had it memorized, word for word, which was like, he says, everybody understands the blues. Everybody from one time or another has the blues. You take that little baby laying in the cradle, don't get that milk bottle fast enough, he gets to kicking and crying, messing up the whole baby bed. He got the blues. And he just goes on from there. And so me and Stevie is such a fun memory. Just went through the whole rap together, where he says, now there's this girl, she got her boyfriend, he just got a brand new GTO, and she want to be with him every time he fired up. Go down to the soda fountain where all the guys and gals be. And she's getting ready to go out this one particular night, and the mother says, now daughter, you can't go out tonight. You went out last night. That's too many nights in a row. 2 nights in a row is too many. Well, she go up in the room, she fasten the door, won't talk to nobody, won't eat. She got the blues. Some people call them the reds, the pinks, but it's the old-fashioned country blues. And I ain't seen my main squeeze in 10 long weeks today, so you know I got him. And then he laughs, and then he just starts playing. And so just that rap is like as essential as learning some Albert King licks. So let me show you some of those things, those signature elements of Albert's playing. So as I was saying, Albert liked to stay in a certain position and play a lot of notes on one string. The track I'm going to play over is in the key of G. So he might go. So all of those notes, I'm playing a B flat here, but I'm beginning with a 2-step pre-bend, and I bring it all the way back down, and then do a pre-bend a whole step, and then bend up 2 steps again. And as I said, his strings were tuned down 1.5 steps. They were very loose. So when he played a vibrato, if you want to try to get that sound on normal strings, these are 10s, like this is a 13, you have to put a little extra effort into it to get it wide and slow, because his strings were much looser. So, so a good practice thing to do is to think of just this position. You're going between those 2 notes, but the B flat, you're going to bend it every increment you can. So if you were to, including not bending it at all. So if you could just go, or you could bend it a 1/2 step. So that was the bend of a 1/2 step, and then not bend. Or you could bend it a whole step. And you have to learn how to get right to the bend as a pre-bend. So to practice that, you should fret the note and then bend to it, pre-bend. And you want them to sound identical. You could do a 1.5 steps, so we have to get up to D flat. So you could do the same thing. Or a 2-step up to D. And you could see, like, Stevie Ray Vaughan used to, we called it a shoulder move. You had You gotta do, something with your body to be able to. So all this one string stuff. And then you might go. So this use of sixths. Again, he picked with his fingers all the time. So I'm hybrid picking. I'll pick on the lower strings with the plectrum, and I'll hit the higher strings with my finger. So like. So when I'm on the high E string, but then I'll go to the pick. A lot of guys do that, and Stevie Ray Vaughan would do that. Or you could just play with your fingers. And then the other thing you could do, which is the Freddie King thing. Freddie King didn't wear a thumb pick, but he wore finger picks on his index and middle finger. So when he was picking with those fingers, it was a pick sound, but then when he picked with his thumb, it was the sound of flesh. The opposite of that are all the guys that use a thumb pick, like Johnny Winter, who got it from Muddy Waters, where when they're using the thumb, it's the sound of a pick, but the rest of it is the sound of fingers. So that is emulated when you hybrid pick, which is what I'm doing, holding a pick and then picking with the fingers. So intonation when you're bending is essential for Albert. So like in Texas Flood, Stevie Ray Vaughan's version of Texas Flood, he really emulates Albert well. And he'll do this sort of stepped ascension of notes going from a quarter step bend to a half step bend to a 3/4 step bend to a whole step bend. So he might go. So you hear this thing. So that's how Stevie would do it, from moving, and a lot of guys who play in a standard type of way, strung normally with the strings in a standard setup, they would do it that way. Whereas Albert's doing it all from here. It makes me think of in Whole Lotta Love, at the end, there's a section where it goes. Then Jimmy Page goes, so that thing, that's right from Albert King. So there it is on a Jimmy Page Led Zeppelin record. So let's play along to the track right now, and we can get into some more specifics of Albert's style.